Hello, my name is Hassan Sorrells, and this is the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast shorts. There's no co-host on these shorts episodes. These are now around 2 to 4 minute, sometimes as long as 6 to 10 minute observations, ideas, thoughts, or rants about the literature, philosophy, psychology, and even the theology of leadership. Because listening to me talk about leadership for now around 2 to 4 minutes is still better than reading and trying to understand yet another business book. Even that business book your coworker won't stop raving about because it quote-unquote changed their life, but you can't see any difference in their leadership behavior. So how good could that author be? Why read writers of classic fiction in order to learn about quote-unquote best practices for leading people when the world of fiction is constructed and the world of reality is, real? Well, for one, the authors of all types and talents, whether they are writing from research and analysis or writing from opinion and lived experience, all of them are people constructing a version of quote-unquote reality. Some versions of reality are more relatable and realistic than others. Some versions of reality are closer to the unsayable emotional and psychological content of reality itself that escapes the left brain-driven approaches to leadership. The second reason why we read classic fiction is that we actually know very little about reality itself. Sure. We know a lot about atoms, quarks, and all the elements that compose the deeply mechanical and engineering structure of life and reality at a biological level and at a mechanical level. But we know almost nothing about the non-mechanical structure of reality. This is why, before the scientific revolution of the 17th and 16th century, theology was known as the queen of the sciences. And leaders in the West, steeped in the stew of postmodern secular rationalism for the last 150 years or so, have lost interest in the narrative that understanding those unmechanical structures of reality provides. And you always fear and loathe what you don't understand. The final reason we read classic fiction is because there are only two genders, and each gender interprets reality through its own complex lens. These lenses are influenced by other factors that leaders tend to focus on in the workplace or any of the other spheres where leadership happens, but those factors cannot be unwound merely through biological mechanical analysis. We read classic fiction because it defies our generation's obsessive focus on the need for endless utility. We read classic fiction because it activates our right brain functions, where the other half of our understanding of reality actually lives. We read classic fiction because we have chipped a few shards off the great marble block of reality itself, and we hubristically think that we are kings and geniuses, but fiction puts paid to that idea. We read classic fiction because such reading, comprehension, and critical thinking required to understand the themes in those books is harder than reading yet another nonfiction book. And leaders think hard thoughts, and leaders do hard things. We read classic fiction because the voice of women, minorities, and others is represented there in interwoven, challenging narratives. And we read classic fiction because it's there. And if we don't pick it up and read it, we will lead as impoverished skeletons, leading around by the nose, or what's left of the nose anyway, other impoverished skeletons through the desolate challenges of our coming future without a map to guide us to the exit. We read because we don't know what we don't know, and our epistemic humility needs to be fed and nourished as leaders. And well, that's it for me. Thank you for listening to the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast today. And now that you've made it this far, you should subscribe to the audio version of this show on all the major podcast players, including Apple iTunes, Spotify, YouTube Music, and everywhere else where podcasts are available. There's also a video version of our podcast on our YouTube channel. Like and subscribe to the video version of this podcast on the Leadership Toolbox channel on YouTube. Just search for Leadership Toolbox and hit the subscribe button there on YouTube. And while you're doing that, leave a 5-star review if you like what we're doing here on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Just go below the player and hit 5 stars. We need those reviews to grow, and it's the easiest way to help grow this show. And tell all your friends, of course, in leadership. By the way, if you don't like what we're doing here, well, you can always listen to another leadership show. There are several other good ones out there. At least that's what I've heard. All right. Well, that's it for me.